Hey everybody, it's Mr. Keeney here. This is going to be the section 1.1 notes. So I'm going to go through some of our new terms in geometry this year, and hopefully you guys can follow along too, and this will be some of the things we're going to talk about in class. So section 1.1, our learning target for this and for the unit is we are going to use vocabulary based on the undefined terms to develop the foundations of geometry. Some of the I can statements: I can identify and use proper notation for a point, line segment, and ray. And I can sketch a point, a midpoint, a line segment, a plane, and a ray. So the first thing I want to point out before I even get into these terms is what I highlighted up here, the undefined terms. Our undefined terms are actually point, line, and plane. So you'll see that sometimes, and you'll notice that on the notes here it says description, because it's not really a definition for point, line, and plane. It is a description. These are undefined terms from which we build the foundations of geometry. So for the first one, a point, it has 0 dimensions, no size, no space, and how we represent it in geometry is by a little dot. Mine's not going to be circular. And we always label it with a capital letter. It does not have to be A, it can be any letter that you choose. Our notation for this would just be that capital letter. Sometimes you'll see people write out point A, but that's not necessary. You can just do that capital letter, what you name it, and how we read it as. So out loud, if I were to see that notation, I would be saying point A. So that is point. And I'm sure you're familiar with this, but it is one of our big 3 undefined terms. The next one is line. Again, another one I'm sure you've heard. It is 1 dimension, it has no thickness, it extends to infinity in 2 directions, that's why we have the arrows, and it needs at least 2 points to make a line. Now that last one's pretty big. I actually might highlight that. You need at least 2 points to make a line. So when we draw or when we sketch our line, you'll notice here that I'm putting 2 points. I could put more, but I need at least 2. So if you were to see a picture with just 1 point on the line, that would not be complete yet. Our notation, I would use those 2 points that determine the line, and I'm going to put a little line or a little bar with arrows, if you will, on top. Another way that we can write this is yx. It does not matter for lines which point comes first, which point comes last. And how I would read these as would be line xy for this top one, or I could say line yx for the bottom one. And that is line, our second undefined term. And our last undefined term, I'm going to scroll down a bit, is plane. It has 2 dimensions. It extends to infinity in 4 directions. And before I read this last one, it is kind of what we just say in class as a flat surface. It is not technically that, because when we think our flat surface, we think our desk that obviously ends, it does not go to infinity, but this is our 2D world that we are to live in. It has 2 dimensions. And this one needs at least 3 non-collinear points. We're going to talk about non-collinear later, and what it really just means is if I were to have a plane, I need at least 3 points, and they can't all be in a line. So let's come up with new letters. Let's say K, J, and L. So I could notate this one then with those 3 points as plane K, J, L. I'm not going to go and write off all the possibilities, because I could order those letters any way I want, those points, K, J, L. I could say plane J, K, L. I could say plane L, K, J, etc., etc. And how we'd say that is plane K, J, L, just like you heard me say on these notes. There is one other way we can name a line. I'm going to switch colors so you can see a little bit better. Sometimes you'll see a capital letter up top, which reminds me of something that I'll have to go back for line. If you see that capital letter in the top right corner, that means it is naming the plane. So I could also just say plane A, and we'd just say plane. And I'm going to go back, I'm going to switch to green here. There is another way we can name lines. Sometimes you'll see lines and they'll have like a lowercase letter, and that's the same thing. So this line could also be called line H. So just as similar with Lines have lowercase letters that name them, and planes sometimes have those uppercase letters. So those are 3 undefined terms. Here's some ones, and notice these say definition because these are defined. The ones up here, they said description because they're undefined. So now we have some defined terms based on point, line, and play. And the first one is collinear. I'm going to go ahead and underline in there. It really just means points that lie on the same line. I underlined the word line in collinear because it's right in there. Co meaning together, or on the same, and line meaning line. So if I were to have collinear points, I would have points on my line. All these points would be collinear because they're on the same line. And then whenever we draw points, we're always going to give them names. Need another letter. Let's go G. So X, Y, Z, and G would be collinear because they're on the same line. Coplanar, and I'm sure you can get it from there, planar meaning plane, and then this co here, co meaning together or on the same plane. So for this one, and remember, I at least need 3 points. I'm going to do a couple more. All these points, let's see, A, B, C, D, and E, all of them are on that same plane, so all of them would be coplanar. So they are on the same plane. Those up here were on the same line. Non-collinear. Non-collinear, the big thing here is being non. They do not lie on the same line. So for a line, I at least need 2 points. Let's call those M and N. But point P, if it was out here off to the side, it would be non-collinear. All 3 of those points are non-collinear because they're not in the same line. And I'm sure that you guys can intuitively pick up that non-coplanar, they will not lie on the same plane. So I guess I'll go back to my pink. Point, point, point. Make sure we always have 3 in our plane. We'll call that, I like X, Y, and Z again. So X, Y, Z. And over here, this point A would be non-coplanar with the rest of the points. All right, moving on. We have our last 3 vocabulary words: line segment, 2 endpoints, and all the points in between. So it has 2 endpoints. That is the main part that you're going to need to have on your picture. I'll actually use black to go with this. So I'm going to make sure that this has endpoints, and I'll name it NP. So this line segment NP, I would notate as NP with the segment bar on top, and I would read it as segments. I guess you could say line segment as well, segment NP. We also could name the same one. It's just like line, where I could switch the letters. It'd be PN, and again, I would just switch it, segment PN. Ray, it has 1 endpoint, and it extends to infinity in 1 direction. Now, just because it has 1 endpoint, we're still going to need at least 2 points. It's a part of a line. So not only do I need this point, we'll call it X, I will need at least 1 other point here. Now, the notation on this one is the one that's very specific, excuse me. I will always, 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 always have the arrow pointing to the right. I do not have a choice. It will always point to the right, and I will always start with this initial point. So the initial point here, X, and then it goes on forever in this direction. That tells me how to name it. So I'm going to start my notation with X, my initial point or my end point, and it is going through Y, and there's my notation. I would read this out loud as Ray XY. That is my only choice for that. I could not name it YX because it has to start with the endpoint. And then our last one here, before we just do some sketches, is opposite rays. So opposite rays are two rays going in opposite direction which have the same endpoint. The first thing you'll see is that these make a line. They're opposite rays. They also make a straight angle, what we're going to talk about later. We'll call this, we'll call it M. And so it has two rays, which means I have one going in this direction. So if I were to call this ray MX, and I have one going the opposite direction. We'll call that y, and that would be ray my. So opposite rays, two rays that go in an exact opposite direction, they will create a line. And then finally here we have sketches. Sketch the intersection of two lines. If these two lines were to intersect, they would intersect right here at a point. So what I want you to get from this is two lines intersect at a point. So there's still something not quite right with this picture. Remember, these are two lines, so I'm going to need to at least have these lines have 2 points, and we're going to add names. So A, B, and we'll call this one C. So two lines, these lines AC and BC intersect at a point. That point would be C. A line and a plane, you can kind of see it, and I'll actually use their color here. Their color was red. A line and a plane will also intersect at a point. We'll call that point P. There's something still wrong with this picture. First of all, my line needs 2 points. I'll call that X up here. And my plane needs at least 3 points. So we'll call this Y, and we'll call this W. Now that would be an acceptable picture. And then the final one, we have 2 planes, and these planes, I'll try to highlight it here, they will intersect at a line. And to make this picture correct, we're gonna have a lot of points here, and we need 3 on this one. 1, 2, 3, A, B, C. And for this one right here, we'll do G, H, and W again. But the big thing is that with these 2 lines will intersect at a point, a line and a plane will intersect at a point, and 2 planes will intersect at a line. So what I want you to do now is pause this video, and I want you to try these examples, and the next time we meet, which will most likely be in our virtual class meeting, we're going to start by going over these examples here. So take a look at these questions. It asks you to name different geometric terms that we just learned, and that is where we'll pick up together. Thanks for watching.